My parents pressured me to babysit my nephew for free, so I moved out silently and took legal steps they never saw coming. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. Ever since I graduated, my parents have leaned on me for everything: repairs, errands, emotional support, even paying the occasional bill. I didn't mind at first. I was living at home to save money, and helping them felt like the least I could do. But over time, what used to be small favors started to feel more like expectations, especially after my sister Melissa moved back home with her 4-year-old son. Melissa had always been the golden child. She could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, even when she dropped out of college, even when she had a baby with a guy who disappeared before the kid was born. When she asked me to babysit just for a few hours, I said yes without hesitation. But that few hours turned into entire evenings, weekends, and last-minute calls that interrupted work meetings or dinner with friends. Whenever I said I was too busy, Mom would sigh and say, "You're single and childless. What else do you have to do?" Dad would chime in, reminding me, "Family comes first, son. Don't be selfish." Those words, "don't be selfish," started to echo in my head every time I even thought about saying no. One Saturday, I missed an important client meeting because Melissa dropped her son off unannounced and turned off her phone. When I told my parents I couldn't keep doing this, they looked at me like I had insulted the family. "You think you're too good to help your sister?" my mother snapped. I went to my room that night and stared at the ceiling, realizing something unsettling. They didn't see me as a brother or a son anymore. I was just the babysitter, unpaid, unappreciated, and trapped in a role I never agreed to play. And that's when the resentment quietly began to grow. The next few weeks blurred into the same draining routine. I'd come home from work, tired and ready to unwind, only to find Melissa's son already there, watching cartoons on the couch, shoes still on, crumbs everywhere. No one even asked anymore. It was just expected. One evening, I finally confronted Melissa. "You can't just drop him off whenever you feel like it," I said, trying to sound calm. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Relax. You love spending time with him," she replied. "Besides, it's not like you have kids or a wife waiting for you." The dismissiveness in her voice hit me harder than I expected. When I told my parents, hoping they'd at least back me up, they sided with her instantly. "Melissa's doing her best," Mom said, arms folded. "You should be grateful you can help. She doesn't have anyone else." Dad added, "You're being dramatic, son. That boy looks up to you. Family means sacrifice." That word again, sacrifice, it always seemed to mean me. At work, I started turning down projects because Melissa might need me. My boss noticed my slipping performance. Friends stopped inviting me out because I always canceled last minute. I didn't even recognize my own life anymore. It revolved entirely around someone else's child. One night, when Melissa texted, "Be there in 10, got a date tonight," something inside me snapped. I replied, "No, I'm busy." She called immediately, furious. "Wow, really? You're gonna let your nephew down like that? What kind of man does that make you?" Her words stung because they sounded exactly like something my mother would say. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time, realizing this wasn't about helping anymore. It was control disguised as family love. And for the first time, I started to feel something stronger than guilt: anger. The breaking point came on a Friday night. I'd planned a rare weekend getaway with friends, my first in over a year. Bags packed, car ready, everything set. Then, just as I was about to leave, Melissa called. Her voice was sugary sweet, the kind she used when she wanted something. "Hey, Can you watch him just for tonight? I've got a last-minute work thing. I hesitated. Melissa, I already made plans. I'm literally heading out the door. She sighed loudly. You're really going to leave your nephew alone so you can go have fun? Wow. 10 minutes later, she was at the door, dropping off her son without another word. I stood there, stunned, watching her car disappear down the street. My parents acted like it was normal. It's just one night, Dad said. She's under pressure. But one night turned into two, and by Sunday morning, when Melissa finally showed up, she looked exhausted, but not from work. Her hair was done, nails freshly manicured, perfume heavy. She'd gone out. She lied again. I didn't even bother hiding my anger. You used me, Melissa, again. Do you even realize what you're doing? She rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. You're good with him, and it's not like you have a life anyway. That line hit me like a slap. Not like you have a life anyway. My mother jumped in immediately. Stop yelling. She's a single mother, for heaven's sake. You should be proud to help. I looked at all of them, Melissa smirking, my parents frowning at me, and something inside me broke. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just went silent. Because in that silence, I realized no one in that room actually saw me as family anymore. They saw me as useful, and that realization hurt worse than any insult ever could. After that weekend, everything changed, but not for the better. My silence was interpreted as guilt, not exhaustion. My mother started walking around the house with tight lips and cold glances. My father barely spoke to me unless it was to remind me of chores or errands. And Melissa? She acted like nothing had happened, texting me baby photos and funny uncle memes, as if she hadn't just crushed my last bit of patience. When I tried to talk about boundaries, they twisted every word. You're overreacting, Mom said one night, waving her hand like I was a child. Families argue. Don't hold grudges. I'm not holding a grudge, I said quietly. I just don't want to be taken advantage of. She frowned, her voice turning icy. You've changed, you know that? Ever since you started working full-time, you think you're better than us. Melissa joined in too. You used to be nice, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Now you're just angry all the time. Maybe you need therapy or something. Every time I tried to assert myself, they spun it into my fault. If I said no, I was selfish. If I said yes but seemed tired, I was ungrateful. If I tried to talk, I was disrespectful. It got to the point where I started questioning my own sanity. I'd lie awake wondering if maybe I was being dramatic, if maybe I owed them more just because they were family. But deep down, something didn't sit right. One night, while scrolling through old emails, I found a message from years ago about a small inheritance my late aunt had left me. Money I never saw. The realization hit like a lightning bolt. My parents had handled it, for me, back then. I didn't say anything right away. But for the first time in years, I started keeping notes. Quietly. Carefully. Because suddenly, I wasn't just angry anymore. That night, I couldn't shake the memory of that old email. I dug deeper, through bank statements, paperwork, even old files in my father's study when he wasn't home. And there it was, my aunt's trust transfer, signed over on my behalf when I was 19. Thousands of dollars meant for me, used apparently for family expenses. Except those expenses turned out to be home renovations, and part of the mortgage. The house I was living in, the same house my parents constantly reminded me was theirs, was partly mine all along. The discovery left me shaking. I wanted to confront them immediately, but something told me to stay quiet. I needed proof. So I reached out to an old friend from college who worked at a small law firm. I explained everything, carefully, cautiously. He listened, then said, "You have every right to know where that money went. If they used your inheritance without consent, that's financial misuse." Hearing those words, financial misuse, made the situation feel heavier than ever. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. It was betrayal written in ink. At dinner that night, I watched my parents laugh with Melissa about her new car, a down payment she said mom and dad had helped with. My stomach twisted. The same parents who told me to stop hoarding money had apparently helped my sister buy a car. With my inheritance, maybe. I stared at my plate, heart pounding, forcing myself to stay calm. I couldn't let them know what I'd found. Not yet. That night, I started documenting everything. Dates, messages, any sign of financial irregularity. My lawyer friend helped me organize it all quietly. And while my parents still saw me as their obedient, guilt-ridden son, something had shifted inside me. They thought they were pulling the strings. But for the first time in my life, I was the one quietly preparing for their reckoning. The weeks that followed were strangely calm. Too calm. I stopped arguing, stopped defending myself, stopped reacting altogether. To my parents, it probably looked like I'd finally come to my senses. They smiled more, started asking for small favors again, and Melissa even joked that I was back to being the family's golden babysitter. But inside, I was cold, detached. Every conversation, every guilt trip, every favor request went into a growing list in my notes app. Dates, times, details. I threw myself into work, taking on extra hours and quietly saving money. My lawyer friend had told me to prepare for independence before taking any action. "You can't fight manipulation if you still live under their roof," he said. And he was right. So I planned my exit meticulously, month by month, paycheck by paycheck. Then came the night that pushed me over the edge. I came home late, exhausted after a 12-hour shift, only to find my nephew asleep on the couch. No one had told me he'd been dropped off. Melissa was out. My parents were watching TV like it was nothing. "Where's Melissa?" I asked. "Out with friends," Mom said. "She said you'd watch him." I stared at them, disbelief boiling into something darker. "She said I'd watch him? She didn't even ask me." Mom looked annoyed. "He's your nephew. Stop acting like a stranger." That was it, the final snap. I didn't yell. I just walked to my room, closed the door, and called Melissa. She didn't pick up, so I did something unthinkable. I called child services. Calmly. I explained the situation and gave the details. An hour later, Melissa showed up, furious, dragging her half-asleep son away while screaming, "You just ruined my life." But I wasn't angry. I was eerily calm. Because for once, I wasn't the one being controlled. And I knew the real storm hadn't even started yet. The fallout was immediate and brutal. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Some from Melissa, some from my parents. All caps, all fury. "How could you do this to your own family? You called child services? Are you insane? You've humiliated us." When I walked into the kitchen that morning, the air felt thick enough to choke on. My mother's eyes were red from crying. My father's voice was sharp, low, and disappointed in a way that cut deeper than yelling ever could. "You betrayed your own blood," he said. "After everything we've done for you, everything they'd done for me." The words echoed in my head, bitter and hollow. I wanted to scream. Wanted to tell them everything I'd discovered about the inheritance, the lies, the manipulation. But something in me stopped. What was the point? They weren't listening. They never had. Melissa stormed in not long after, eyes wild, makeup smeared from tears. "You think you're better than me now?" she spat. "You've always been jealous, always trying to make me look bad." I tried to stay calm. "Melissa, you left your son here without asking. That's not jealousy, it's neglect." She slapped the counter so hard the sound echoed through the house. "Don't you dare lecture me about parenting. You don't know what it's like." Mom grabbed her hand, whispering, "Don't waste your breath on him. He's not family anymore." That sentence hit like a punch. Not family anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there, frozen, realizing that every bond I'd believed in had been conditional, built on obedience and silence. That night, I packed a small bag, locked my bedroom door, and sat in the dark. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry. Not from guilt, but from grief, because it finally hit me. I hadn't lost my family that day. I just accepted that I never really had one. The next few days passed in slow motion. No one spoke to me. Meals were eaten in silence. Doors slammed harder than usual, and even the air felt heavy with contempt. I knew I couldn't stay there anymore, not after being called not family. Every corner of that house felt contaminated with memories of guilt and servitude. So one Friday night, while everyone was asleep, I quietly packed my things. Just the essentials: clothes, laptop, a few sentimental photos I couldn't leave behind. I left a short note on the kitchen counter. "I'm leaving. I need peace. Please don't contact me." When I stepped outside, the night air hit me like freedom and fear wrapped together. My car was packed to the brim, and as I pulled away from the driveway, I glanced at the dim light from the living room window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel obligated to look back. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment across town. It wasn't much: peeling paint, secondhand furniture, thin walls, but it was mine. The silence was strange at first, almost too quiet. I kept expecting my phone to ring, my mom's voice guilt-tripping me into coming home. But it didn't. Instead, the first text came from Melissa. "Melissa, congrats, you destroyed the family." Me? No, I just stopped letting you use me. She didn't reply after that. In the days that followed, I felt the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones, a mix of relief and heartbreak. I'd lost everything that once defined my life, but for the first time, I could breathe without permission. Then, about a week later, an envelope arrived from my lawyer friend. Inside was a letter confirming that the funds from my aunt's inheritance were officially traced, and that my parents might owe me compensation for unauthorized use. I sat there staring at the paper, hands trembling. They thought I'd walked away quietly, but my silence was only the beginning of something much louder. I met with my lawyer the next morning in his small, paper-cluttered office downtown. The city buzzed outside, but inside, everything felt tense and still. He laid out the documents one by one: bank transfers, property ledgers, the trust account trail. "It's all here," he said quietly. "They used your inheritance to pay off part of their mortgage, and gave a portion to your sister. You have every right to reclaim it." I stared at the papers, numb. My parents' signatures were right there, proof of the betrayal I'd only suspected. I'd expected anger, but what I felt instead was something colder. Clarity. We filed a formal notice of inquiry. Nothing aggressive, just a legal request for transparency. Within a week, the reaction came like an explosion. My mother called first, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this to us? It's just money. Family doesn't take family to court." "Family doesn't steal either," I said quietly. She gasped, like I'd stabbed her. "You're punishing us for raising you. Is that it?" Then came my father, furious, shouting through the phone. You ungrateful boy, we fed you, housed you, and now you're turning against us? I didn't turn, I said. You did, years ago. Melissa's message came last, short, bitter. You'll regret this. They're too old for this stress. If anything happens, it's on you. I didn't respond. My lawyer advised patience. Don't engage emotionally. The facts will speak. And they did. The financial records painted a picture of manipulation so deep that even I was shocked at how systematic it had been. Transfers labeled as education support, withdrawals tagged as maintenance, all covering up what was mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one explaining myself, apologizing, or trying to be the bigger person. This time, they were the ones panicking, and that realization felt better than revenge. A week later, my parents called and asked to meet in person to clear things up. Their tone was uncharacteristically polite, almost rehearsed. My lawyer advised against going alone, but I needed to face them, not as the obedient son they used to control, but as someone finally standing his ground. When I arrived at the house, everything looked the same rose bushes my mother used to brag about, the same porch light flickering from years of neglect. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Inside, the air was heavy with tension. Melissa was already there, arms crossed, eyes burning. My father sat at the dining table like a judge. My mother clutched tissues she didn't need yet. Dad started, his voice steady but cold. We never meant to hurt you. It was a misunderstanding. The money was used for the family's benefit. I laid the documents on the table. You mean your benefit, my inheritance paid for your mortgage, and Melissa's car? Mom's eyes widened. That's not fair. We raised you. We thought it was all ours to manage. We just didn't think you'd hold you accountable, I cut in. You didn't think I'd ever stop being your scapegoat. Melissa slammed her hand on the table. Oh, stop acting like a victim. You're tearing this family apart. I looked at her calmly. No, Melissa, I'm just refusing to carry it anymore. The room went silent. For the first time, no one had a comeback. Even my father, usually full of righteous authority, just stared at the documents. The truth was right in front of him, black and white, undeniable. Finally, I stood up and said quietly, I don't hate you. I'm just done being used. As I walked out, my mother whispered, almost to herself, You've changed. I paused at the door and said, No, Mom, I just stopped mistaking manipulation for love. And with that, I left the house that once owned me, free but heavier than ever. Weeks passed in silence. No more calls, no more guilt-filled messages. The legal process moved slowly but steadily, and my lawyer kept me updated with quiet confidence. Then, one afternoon, I received the final notice, confirmation that my parents had agreed to a private settlement. They were legally required to reimburse a portion of my inheritance. The money wasn't everything I'd lost, but it was acknowledgement, a written confession that they'd crossed a line. When the deposit hit my account, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. Years of pressure, guilt, and emotional blackmail finally cracked and fell away. I paid off my small debts, furnished my apartment properly, and even took a few days off work. For the first time, I could sit in silence and not feel dread crawling up my spine. Word eventually spread through relatives. My aunt called to say, Your parents are telling everyone you ruined them. I laughed softly. No, I said. I just stopped letting them ruin me. Then came Melissa. Her voice was smaller this time, almost defeated. They're not doing well, she said. You could at least talk to them. I hesitated, then replied, They only reach out when they need something. Tell them I hope they're okay, but I'm not going back. After that, something shifted. For once, they needed me. My father called once, asking for advice about refinancing, and I kept it professional, emotionless. My mother texted me about missing her son, but I didn't reply. It wasn't revenge, it was balance. I had spent years chasing approval, mistaking silence for peace and obedience for love. But now, the power dynamic had flipped, completely. They could no longer control me with guilt. They could no longer reach me with shame. And in that quiet, undeniable truth, I found something even better than revenge. I found peace that didn't depend on them. Months later, I settled into a life that finally felt like mine. The apartment that once felt too small now felt like a sanctuary. I filled it with quiet. No crying child, no slamming doors, no guilt disguised as conversation. Just peace. I'd wake up early, make coffee, and sit by the window watching the sunrise. It was strange how something as simple as silence could feel like victory. My parents eventually stopped trying to reach me. The messages slowed, then stopped altogether. The last one I ever got from my mother simply said, "We didn't know we'd lose you like this." I read it 3 times, then deleted it. She was right. They hadn't lost me because of what I did. They lost me because of everything they'd done. Melissa's life spiraled after that. Word got around about the child services call, and her reputation in the family circle took a hit. The same people who once called me cold started whispering about her irresponsibility. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching her face the consequences of her choices was its own quiet justice. Every now and then, I'd drive past my parents' old house. The roses out front were wilted, the paint fading. It looked smaller than I remembered, like the illusion had finally shrunk to its true size. I parked once, for a moment, and stared at the house that had once been my cage. I thought about the years I'd given, time, money, energy, patience, and how they'd used every bit of it until I was empty. And yet, somehow, walking away had refilled me. I whispered under my breath, "You taught me duty. I learned freedom." Then I turned the engine back on and drove away, not with anger, but with calm. Because revenge didn't have to be loud. It could be quiet, steady, and final. And in that silence, I finally heard what peace really sounded like.